Look at your shoes, old man. That coffee costs more than your entire weekly paycheck. Now clean it up before I have you thrown out of my building.
Those were the exact words Christian Vance screamed at his own father, Thomas, in front of 20 elite corporate executives. Christian didn't care that this man had sacrificed his youth, his health, and his sanity to put him through Harvard. To Christian, Thomas was just an embarrassing stain on his perfect, wealthy life. But Christian had no idea. In exactly 24 hours, Thomas would be dead. And when the family lawyer opened the sealed will, Christian's entire world of luxury would violently implode. Thomas Vance was a man who lived in the shadows so his son could walk in the light. For 30 years, he worked 3 separate janitorial jobs. He skipped meals and wore shoes with holes in the soles, all just to ensure Christian never felt the sting of poverty. But wealth breeds monsters. The moment Christian graduated and landed a high-paying executive role at a prestigious real estate firm, he didn't thank his father. Instead, he banned him from his apartment and told his wealthy friends that his parents died in a car crash, all because he was too ashamed to admit his father cleaned toilets for a living. During that final boardroom clash, Thomas slowly dropped to his knees, his old joints cracking loudly. With shaking hands, he took a rag and began wiping the hot coffee off Christian's expensive leather shoes. Christian just glared down at him with pure disgust, ordering him to get the soles, demanding that no filth track into his office, and commanding him never to call him son again, dismissing him as nothing but the help. Thomas stopped wiping. He looked up, and though there were no tears in his eyes, he carried a profound, crushing sadness. He simply nodded slowly, stood up, and walked out of the room, leaving his mop behind. Christian thought he had won. He thought he had finally put the old man in his place. But as Thomas walked out of that building, he made a phone call that would change everything. The very next morning, Christian received the call that his father had suffered a massive, fatal heart attack. The doctor said it was the result of years of untreated exhaustion and stress. Standing in the empty living room of his father's small house, Christian tossed old family photo albums into a trash can, searching only for valuable documents. All he found was a simple white envelope containing a single rusted key. He muttered bitterly to himself, calling his father a useless loser who couldn't even leave behind a proper inheritance. Christian didn't shed a single tear at the funeral. In fact, he barely stayed for the service, entirely consumed by his eagerness to get to the reading of the will. He assumed his father had a few $1,000s saved up in a hidden bank account, and Christian wanted every last cent. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Later that day, Christian sat confidently in a leather chair at a prestigious, old-money law firm downtown, smirking impatiently. He tapped his luxury watch and demanded that the elderly lawyer, Mr. Harrison, speed things up. He claimed they both knew a janitor wouldn't leave much, and he just wanted the house signed over so he could sell it and get back to his real life. Mr. Harrison stopped adjusting his glasses and looked at Christian with a mixture of pity and absolute disdain. Opening a thick, gold-embossed folder, he quietly told Christian that he clearly did not know his father at all, before starting to read the last will and testament of Thomas Vance. The lawyer cleared his throat as Christian's smug smile began to falter. The will stated that to his son, Christian, who believed his father's life was defined only by the dirt he cleaned up and who was ashamed of his uniform, Thomas would leave exactly what Christian thought he was worth, $1 single, and the rusted key left in his home. Christian slammed his hands on the desk, standing up in a rage, screaming that it had to be a joke because the old man washed floors and had nothing else to leave anyway. Mr. Harrison calmly raised a hand and told Christian to sit down because he was not finished. He continued reading the document, which revealed that the remainder of the estate, including the massive commercial real estate empire known as Zenith Holdings, valued at $450 million, was left entirely to charity, under the sole management of a newly appointed trustee. Christian froze, the blood completely draining from his face as his voice cracked. He stammered that Zenith Holdings was the exact parent company of the firm he worked for. insisting his father couldn't have owned it because he was just the janitor there. Christian's mind raced. Zenith Holdings owned half the skyline in the city, meaning it was the very company where Christian had publicly humiliated his father just 24 hours prior. Mr. Harrison then pulled out a document showing Thomas Vance's signature as the founder and majority shareholder of the multi-million-dollar conglomerate. The lawyer explained that Thomas had founded the company 40 years ago. When Christian's mother passed away from a rare illness, Thomas was completely heartbroken. He chose to step down from active management to live a humble life, taking a job as a janitor in his own buildings because he wanted to stay close to the ground, understand his workers, and teach his son the value of hard work from the bottom up. He wanted to see if Christian would love him for who he was or just for his money. Christian sank back into his chair, gasping for air as the room seemed to spin around him. He had spent his entire life looking down on the man who actually owned a roof over his head. But the nightmare was only just beginning because the will contained one final, devastating clause. Suddenly, the door to the law office opened, and a young woman walked in, wearing a sharp, professional suit. It was Chloe, the quiet, hardworking receptionist from Christian's office, the same receptionist Christian had threatened to fire earlier that week. Christian stammered in confusion, asking what she was doing there and demanding she leave what he thought was a private family matter alone. But Mr. Harrison corrected him, introducing Chloe as the new sole trustee of Zenith Holdings. He revealed that Thomas's will explicitly stated she now controlled the entire fortune, including the very building where Christian worked. Chloe looked at Christian with absolute steel in her eyes, walked over, and dropped a cardboard box onto his lap. She told him that his father had noticed exactly how he treated people, the cleaning staff, the security guards, the assistants, and his own flesh and blood. But she noted that Thomas had also seen how she rushed over with paper towels to help him up and comfort him when Christian poured hot coffee on his shoes. Thomas Vance didn't just distance his money from his son. He gave it to the one person who showed his father basic human dignity. Chloe leaned over the desk, her voice calm but devastating as she informed Christian that his employment was officially terminated, his corporate apartment was forfeited, and his company car was repossessed. She gave him exactly 1 hour to clear out his desk. Christian grew desperate, tears finally streaming down his face as he screamed that Thomas was his father, that it was his money, and that he would sue. But Mr. Harrison quietly reminded him that he couldn't sue, asking if he even knew what the rusted key was meant to open. Hours later, stripped of his expensive suit and wearing ordinary clothes, Christian stood inside his late father's old, dusty garage. He found a small, padlocked locker in the corner. His hands shook violently as he inserted the rusted key, turned it, and watched the lock click open. Christian pulled the locker open, but inside there was no gold, no money, and no stock portfolios. Inside was a single blue janitor's uniform, identical to the one Thomas wore every day. Taped to the fabric was a final note written in his father's handwriting. In the letter, Thomas wrote that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. He expressed that he had given Christian everything a father could give, but had forgotten to teach him kindness. He concluded by saying that if Christian ever wanted to earn his way back into the company, he would have to start exactly where his father did, to wear the uniform, learn what it means to be humble, and finally understand true wealth. He signed it with the words, "I love you, son. I always did." Christian dropped to his knees on the cold concrete floor of the garage, clutching the blue uniform tightly to his chest as he broke down into loud, agonizing sobs. The realization of what he had lost, not the millions of dollars, but his father's irreplaceable love, finally crushed him completely. Christian had spent his whole life chasing status, only to realize that the most valuable thing he ever had was the man he treated like garbage. He was left alone in the quiet garage with a life-changing choice: remain proud and broke, or put on a uniform and finally learn the lesson his father died trying to teach him.